Hey now, welcome to Random Movie Club. I'm your host, Rob Logan. In each episode, I sit down with a co-host to discuss any movie of their choosing. The only qualification is that the movie is available to watch at home on DVD, Blu-ray, or digital. Before you listen to this show, I highly recommend that you watch the movie we're going to talk about, because we're going to spoil everything. Also, at the end of the episode, I'll tell you which movie we're going to discuss next, so you have enough time to watch it. If you enjoy Random Movie Club, you can help keep it going by supporting us on Patreon. Supporters get special benefits like exclusive bonus episodes, patron-only events, giveaways, and more. Show your support for Random Movie Club and the Geek Generation by visiting our Patreon campaign at thegeekgeneration.com/support. On this episode, I'll be discussing Unbreakable with Silence Night. Let's roll the film. Unbreakable was released in 2000 from director M. Night Shyamalan. Also written by Shyamalan, the film stars Bruce Willis, Samuel L. Jackson, and Robin Wright. Okay, you ready for the first big question?
I suppose I'm ready for the first big question. How big is your question? Is the question.
Biggest question ever.
Then dang it if I'm not ready for it. Let's do this.
All right. Why did you choose this movie?
Well, I chose this movie in part because when I was growing up, I had an addiction to feeling like I was a superhero. It made me feel safe. It made me feel comfortable. And this movie really is like, in a basic sense, a movie about a normal person doing extraordinary things, right? So I really related to that and thought it was very interesting, and it kind of brought me out of my shell, my little introverted shell when I was young. And on top of that, it just had some great twists, some great scenes, and I was fascinated by it. It's just a great nerdy movie to me.
I remember when I first saw it, it kind of blew me away because I didn't really think about it as being a superhero movie. But it's really just about like comic book mythology and how that's like our modern mythology and everything. And I love that about it.
Interesting. I did really appreciate sort of how they tied that in, the modern mythology, sort of showing how comic books maybe harken back to just like any other great myths, you know, you hear about, have some truth to them. And I thought that was a really interesting way of framing it. I was actually kind of blown away by that when I first heard it.
So as I always do, I gathered a whole bunch of trivia from IMDb, which we can talk about because I love it. The first thing is the scene where David's son tries to shoot him to prove he has superpowers is based on the popular urban legend that George Reeves was once confronted by a child who asked to shoot him with a real gun while he was in his Superman costume. According to the legend, Reeves got the boy to put the gun down by convincing him it would ricochet and hurt someone else.
That is interesting. I had no idea that was based on anything. I actually thought that was a really powerful scene, and it was a very tense scene. But that's even more intense now that I know it was based on something that actually happened. Oh, yeah, that is incredible. That. Wow. But that's quick thinking, right? That's put it into sort of terms that a little kid can understand. Hey, I may be a superhero, but it might hurt somebody if you shoot me.
Right. He could even have been an in character for that. Like, you know what happens when you shoot Superman.
With the typical like 80s superhero voice, or maybe even like 50s. You know what'll happen here? Like, yeah.
Charlene Woodard, who plays the mother to Samuel L. Jackson's character, is actually almost a full 5 years younger than her on-screen son.
That is interesting. We'll get to her in a little bit, but that's very interesting.
In the scene where David looks back at the drug dealer played by M. Night Shyamalan and catches the character furtively staring back, the movie makes use of the scary shiny glasses trope. This trope is commonly used in Japanese manga and anime to indicate the sinister intentions of a villain.
I was not aware of that trope, but that makes sense.
I was not either. I'm not a big anime guy, but I didn't even notice it in the movie to be like that prominent of an effect.
Well, you know, everyone has their flaws, just like he can't handle water. You know, hey, you don't like anime. I understand. You know, we all superheroes have their flaws.
It's true. Julianne Moore was offered the part of Audrey Dunn, but turned it down to work on Hannibal.
On Hannibal. Good choice, bad choice? Thoughts?
I haven't seen Hannibal, actually, so...
Okay. I think
I would always say that turning down this movie was a bad choice.
I think you know the bias in me wants to say it's a poor choice, but I'm not necessarily speaking dollars and cents. I'm not so certain that was a bad choice.
The first comic that Elijah receives is an issue of Active Comics. The logo is deliberately reminiscent of the original logo of Action Comics, the series that introduced Superman.
Mm-hmm. I am aware of that.
A lot of nods to different comic book things throughout the movie, for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Unlike most movies that are shot in different chronological order from the script, Unbreakable was shot in sequence.
Was shot completely in sequence?
Completely in sequence.
That is fascinating.
Some of the places where they cut back and forth between different scenes that are going on concurrently, obviously they'd have to film one and then the other, but everything else was shot in sequence.
That's fascinating. I'm so familiar with the concept of shooting things in their discrete piece parts, and then and then obviously gluing them together for effect. And it's more efficient, obviously, in a budgetary sense. But that's interesting. They shot it. Was there any? Do you know if there's any reason for that, or just a choice by the director?
Not that I'm aware of. Yeah, as far as I know, it's just a choice.
Interesting. Some logical consistency there. As an actor, I don't know if that makes things easier, makes things harder, but that's interesting.
One would think it would help with the performance if you're going through the same progression as your character, because I imagine it's a little disorienting to shoot out of order all the time.
I would think that's kind of what I was thinking. I was thinking if you're sort of going through this progression of the movie and you're jumping around, and in one scene you're supposed to be, happy, and the next scene you're devastated, and you're just, up and down, up and down. I could see where that might be a little draining. You might not get the same effect as if you just took it, from logical start to finish and kind of rode the emotional roller coaster that the movie is supposed to portray. It's more natural. It's more natural progression. I could see that being very beneficial. That's interesting to me. I wasn't aware of that. That's cool.
Yeah, I don't think there are too many movies that actually do that.
No, not that I don't know any. That was the first time I've heard that.
Speaking of the way it was shot, the film is shot as a series of long tracking shots, often with stark shadows or unusual camera angles to mimic the storyboard flow of a comic book.
I like that.
There's one scene in particular that makes me think of that, where they're in Elijah's office, like the first time they're in limited edition, and David and Joseph are sitting across from him, and you watch the camera pan to look at Elijah, and then you watch it pan back. That's like a comic panel going back and forth.
Very much so. I did not notice that, but that's a great way to frame it. So it's very much like the switching scenes or the switching panels of a comic book. Oh, that's great. There were so many things about this movie that kind of tied back into its comic book roots, which I thought were interesting. So that's really cool. That's really cool. Yeah, I didn't notice that one.
I'm sure some of the many interesting shots in this movie will come up as we're talking about it, because there are so many.
Absolutely.
Osteogenesis imperfecta is a real but rare disease.
I did know that. In fact, I believe it was recently in life I looked up that disease. I thought it was interesting. I think it was probably my 100th watch through of the movie. I was like, is that a real disease? And sure enough, Wikipedia saves the day. It's a real disease, and but again, very rare.
Yeah, so, super wild.
I would say most people don't last with that disease. I believe it's not it's one of those diseases where it would be weird if you lasted more than a year or two, kind of thing.
I imagine you get to be like the kid in the bubble type thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. The scene at the stadium, of which David Dunn brushes past a mother and child and senses child abuse just before he confronts the drug dealer, is believed to be Kevin Crumb and his mother from the movie Split.
Is that just speculation? Is there some hard evidence there?
I don't know how hard evidence it is. I think it at least started as fan speculation when Split came out, and we'll be talking about Split very soon. But yeah, I'm
curious if there was some foresight into that, or if this is just a retroactive, fangasm we're sort of having over this topic, and looking back and looking for the clues, putting the pieces together of the puzzle. But that's interesting. I'm all for it. You know what? Give me that headcanon. I'm down for more mysteries and tie-ins.
Well, even though it's not in the trivia here, the character from Split was supposed to be a part of this movie and was taken out and made into a separate movie all those years later. So it's possible that was the case.
That would make more sense then if he was in fact due to be in the movie and then removed at the last minute. I could see how the tie-in would still exist, the leftover pieces of it. That's okay, cool.
Yeah. Elijah Price's distinctive hairstyle was based on the Civil War era activist Frederick Douglass, whose name coincidentally contains the word glass.
Ah, nice. Yeah. You know what? I did recognize the hairstyle, actually.
It is.
Maybe not until I was older, but it very much stands out. And so it's
Yeah.
it's a very iconic hairdo. So it's very Frederick Douglass.
When Elijah's mother gives her son his first comic book, she mentions that it is a good one with a surprise ending. Her quote foreshadows the plot of the movie.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a pretty obvious one once you go back in time and sort of watch it again.
Totally.
There's always those foreshadowing moments that get you and you go, I should have seen it. It was there all along.
There's so many things in this movie that I feel like I should have seen, and I feel like a bad movie watcher for not having caught on.
You know what? It's funny. It's funny, and I actually really appreciated sitting down and watching this movie one more time to think about some of the things I may have glossed over or glassed over. So, Rob will never invite me back.
Are you kidding? Puns are always welcome.
But it was very interesting to go back through and sort of pay a little more attention to detail. You see sort of these things that you missed the first time, and you go, oh, there it was in front of my face the whole time. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's awesome.
Last thing in the trivia here, as in comic books, the main characters have their identified color schemes. David is green and Elijah is purple. They show up in their clothes, the wallpaper and bed sheets in their houses, Elijah's note to David, and various personal items, among other things.
Very noticeable. I actually have some notes on color that we can talk about in a little bit.
Sweet.
But yes, very noticeable on the colors. And if you're up for it, I have one piece of trivia for you.
Totally.
I'm going to pull this out on you. So in the intro, where talking about the comic books, when they're talking about the comic books and sort of, how many comic books are read a day, the prices and stuff, they mention that the comics, usually comics are about, can go for anywhere from $1 to $140,000. But in fact, Action Comics #1 sold for $3.2 million a few years back, which it was initially a 10-cent issue. So, kids, save your Beanie Babies.
I don't remember the last person to buy it, but I know at one point Nicolas Cage owned that book.
Is that right? I'm wondering that. I guess it's just set up for some kind of like ostentatious nerd display to be the king of all nerds, to have something like that, because obviously you never take it out and ruin its pristine condition. But I think that's crazy that it sells for that much. It just tells you like, us nerds and our collectibles, man, we love them.
100%.
So yeah, it went up to 140,000. I was like, that doesn't seem right. And I went off and I was like, okay, Action Comics #1, Superman. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, they go
in
way
the millions
higher.
of dollars. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about the movie itself. First thing is, we kind of referenced there just the myriad of interesting shots that we see in this movie. And the first thing we kind of see after that little like text intro is an image reflected by a large mirror, even though we don't even realize it's a mirror right away, which means that the first thing that we're seeing in the entire movie is a piece of glass.
I actually did not even put that together. That's incredible. So there it is, the foreshadowing, the glass, it's here.
One of the reasons that I love doing this show so much is because, like you, I've watched this movie so many times, and I never analyzed it the way that I did on my most recent viewing, because I was looking for every little thing, and I couldn't believe I didn't notice that before.
I completely missed it even on this watch through. I think it's probably because I was at the beginning kind of scrubbing to get in there to get to watch the meat of the movie. I didn't even see that happen and register. I wasn't there. That's incredible. So the first thing we know is, hey, glass, we're here.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. It's an awesome reference to where the movie's going.
And then the first shot that we see of David on the train, he's leaning his head against the window.
Glass.
Another piece of glass. This comes in through the movie many more times, actually.
You know what? It's all coming together for me now, and I'm putting the pieces together. The conspiracy series theory is forming for me. I see it now. It was glass all along.
Yeah. On the train, and again, more cool shots. We get like the back and forth perspective of David and the sports agent, kind of like the kid watching through the seats as they're having their conversation. I
thought that was a fantastic way they shot the perspective. Yeah. And you weren't even, at least I wasn't aware at first, that it was the little girl's perspective. But as it leaves that conversation and transitions into his feelings about the conversation, you see sort of him focus on what's in front of him, and that you could tell then that it's the little girl's face doing the shot. I thought that was a very fascinating shot. Definitely throughout the movie, they really, really hit some of those interesting shots. I love the way they film it. Another one they did was when the boss was talking about the raise. they did the scene where he's standing at his locker with his locker open with another piece of glass, a mirror sitting right there in the locker, and you hear the boss's voice. Or I don't know if you hear the boss's voice before you see him. I think so.
I think you do.
And so because he first references him, he says Noel, and he starts talking, and then he closes the locker to reveal the boss. I thought that was an interesting shot as well. And
that's another very like comic book type thing, like obscuring something with a part of the drawing and then kind of removing it to show what's behind it.
Exactly.
Oh, so good.
So good.
The conversation he has with the sports agent, I found super awkward, as we're probably supposed to. And there's a lot of those moments in this movie. But I thought it was even more awkward when she like jumped to the conclusion of, oh, this guy is clearly hitting on me. I need to like move seats.
So I actually think that's interesting. So I called it the flirtation scene at the beginning. It's awkward, but what I think it does in the long run for the movie is it introduces us to this idea that there's something wrong with his life. There's something out of place or missing. And so we're, with the marital issues, that's your first injection into, okay, something's off in his life. Something's not right. And that carries for a while, actually. A couple of things, come up with his relationship, and it actually jumps right into sort of like my thoughts about the colors of the movie. If you're ready to get into that.
No,
yeah.
Please.
So what I found was that starting with that shot and carrying out through the most of the beginning of the movie, there was this sense of like normalcy. There was dull colors. There was a very tepid narrative atmosphere, right? So everything there was just very bland. It was even his personality, right? So his personality is very tepid. Like he's very after the crash, he's very unfazed. He seems very dull about the events that just happened. Now, could that have been shock? Sure. But probably not. It's probably more so his detachment from reality, sort of the awkwardness of his life, if you will. And I thought that was really interesting. So they convey this sort of very tepid atmosphere where everything is very dull and very slow. Just the whole narrative atmosphere is just down. And I thought it was really cool because the first bright color that I noticed in the movie is the letter from Mr. Glass under his windshield. It is when he flips the envelope open, there's a very distinct bright purple color on the envelope. Yes. And that's the first bright color you see in the movie. And so then during the movie, the scenes where color shows up, where does it show up? Because after he goes to see Mr. Glass and sort of dismisses him, colors sort of dry out again. And he moves away from that scene. There's not a lot of bright colors happening.
Interesting.
But they do, in fact, come back some more during certain scenes. In the weight scene where he's lifting more weights than he should be able to.
Yes.
The shirt of his son is a bright red. The weight clasps are a bright red. Even his facial color finally started getting color. There's a bright red to even a normal skin tone to him. So there, the date with his wife after things were feeling a little better.
Yep.
And then also his wife actually regained some color after the conversation they finally had with each other about his sickness. So there were these moments where as things were sort of becoming as they should be, if you will, sort of returning back to giving him some sort of like purpose or meaning, the color started showing up all around him. Every time he used his powers, there were bright colors. The colors of the shirts of the criminals. Other things in the scene, every time he was using his abilities, bright, bold colors that you saw nowhere else in the movie were appearing, almost as if him using his powers brought color back to his life. Was kind of my thoughts there.
Yeah. We get visual saturation as his life is becoming more full.
Exactly. It was the fulfillment of his life that I think was sort of bringing back the colors in a physical sense to us.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love that.
Oh,
it's such a subtle thing. And the movie as a whole does feel very muted in tone. But yeah, that's a key part of it for sure.
Yeah, that's I think one thing. I had a small thought about the relationship with his wife. You could see that they were having issues. You saw on the train with the quote unquote flirtation scene. And then when they were leaving after the traumatic event of the crash, you saw that they started to hold hands for the kid's sake, and then they let go of each other's hands.
Right.
And I think that most oftentimes, you see a lot of relationships portrayed in this sense that, or even in real life, that there's something missing. And that's usually between the two people. That's between the couple themselves. They have problems with each other. They're not being fulfilled by each other. But in this movie, the lack of fulfillment was actually with himself. And I thought that was really cool to portray. That as soon as he was becoming fulfilled with who he was as a person, everything else regained its color, including his relationship with his wife, which we see near the end.
Yeah. Because he wasn't able to be the person that she wanted for so much of the movie and be present in the relationship, because like he said, he woke up with a sadness every morning and he didn't know what the cause of that was. And it wasn't until he filled that he was like, okay, I'm whole, I'm me again. Now I can be with somebody else.
Exactly.
So jumping back to the hospital after the train accident, we get another wonderfully framed shot. I love this one where there's the body in the foreground and he's being attended to in the background, and it's slightly out of focus in the foreground. You just see it like start to convulse and then bleed out right as he finds out he's the sole survivor. That's incredibly powerful.
I will second you on that. In fact, I will just go ahead and say how powerful that scene is. That scene has stuck with me for so long. I always remember that scene when I think back to this movie. It's such a powerful shot, but the juxtaposition of him being okay, sort of out of it, and then the breathing foreground of a body that eventually starts to bleed out, and you really sort of grasp the seriousness, the severity of the crash, and he yet has a scratch on him. And now you're understanding sort of the doctor's fascination with all the questions, because he's sort of dismissive. You know, to him, he's detached. It's dull. Everything's dull. Even the crash is kind of dull. He's like, whatever. Yep. But the doctor is fascinated with him and asking these questions and persisting, like, I need to know where you were on the train. I need to know, sir, you have nothing wrong with you.
Yeah. Next, we get the note that you referenced earlier, asking how many days in his life he's been sick, to which he kind of gets the seed planted. He checks with his boss. He asks his wife. And then we get the first Elijah flashback. And the first shot we see is Elijah reflected in a TV screen, another piece of glass.
Oh, there it is again.
It keeps happening.
Is it okay to correct the host here? Because the first shot we see is actually him. You're skipping over one of my favorite scenes, which is the cold opening scene, where
okay, sure, yeah,
you sort of get this air of mystery and wonder, like, what's happening. It's when it actually, you can't skip it because it introduces two of my favorite characters from the whole movie, the doctor and the mom. I love their acting. The doctor,
great.
He's incredible. The guy did a great job. His facial expressions stun me every time. He's so good.
Yeah. And it's a crime that he's in it for that little.
It is an injustice. I'm telling you, he's got to make a comeback sometime. I want to see him in the new movie. I've
seen him in other things, and I can't place his face.
So he is in Lord of War, and he is also in Tears of the Sun and Oz. Those are the major things I could find him in, because I did look him up, because obviously I loved his small performance, but I was blown away with it. It's so good.
So good.
He doesn't have any major roles, I guess, is why it's probably hard to place him. I couldn't find any major roles he was in, but he did have some small parts.
Okay. Another great shot. We get the rotation of the camera along with the comic as Elijah's turning it in his lap. Love that.
Oh, yes, absolutely. That's just, again, more lovely shots from this movie.
Yeah. He really stretched the director muscles here and the cinematography muscles, and just thought outside the box, which was super appreciated.
And I think he did that because he wanted to portray this as sort of a comic book. You know, if you think about this as a comic book, how can you portray this so that it has a distinct personality from every other movie you've seen, right? Totally. If everything else is supposed to be just a movie and this is supposed to be a comic book portrayed as a movie, how can you best represent that? And I think he did a good job.
Yep. We go to limited edition from there. This is the first time we see adult Elijah, once again, reflected in glass. This time it's the glass covering that sketch of the comic book cover.
Yep. Where he was doing the sales of the comic.
For the one who wanted to buy it for his 4-year-old for some reason.
For his 4-year-old, yes, exactly. And he took offense to that.
Rightfully so.
And so this brings up a good point, because it's at this point, well, maybe not exactly at this point, but I would say definitely at this point where you start to notice a little bit of a psychological ambiguity with Elijah. You don't know really what's his motive, what's his purpose, what's going on with him, but you see him starting to bleed into the story, and all of a sudden he's a little cranky about what's going on here. He's got a little bit of an anger issue about how serious he takes his comics, which, can be an understandable thing for some people. It's something he respects, and he doesn't want to see it done a disservice. But you start to question, okay, so how is this interesting character going to fit into the narrative we're being told here? What's going on?
David goes to meet him, and Elijah reveals his condition to him, suggests that maybe there's someone on the other side of the spectrum, kind of setting up the entire movie for us. Part of David, you feel, wants it to be true, even though he's denying it, because I don't think he would have, like, as he's leaving, Elijah asks him what he does and where he works. And at that point, a normal person that was like, you're crazy, leave us alone, would not have told him that information. And I feel like answering that question is David's way of being like, I don't believe this, but part of me really wants to.
Part of him really wants to. I think that he's skeptical, but he needs something. And I think deep down he knows he needs something, right? We talked about this sort of unfulfillment, the lack of color in his life. And I think that deep down, that's his fascination with being sick. That's why he took it so serious. That's why he spoke to his wife for the first time in a while. That was the most serious conversation we had seen them have to date, and you could only assume that's probably how things normally are. They don't really talk to each other. They're very quick. They have short bursts of conversation, only the practical, logical amounts of conversation, nothing more, nothing less. And the question of how many sick days has he had was the first real conversation you saw between them, because I believe that's the first injection of energy he's had in a while. And he has this thing to be fascinated about, like maybe there is something wrong, or maybe there is something different, or, you know, anything to give me a little bit of color in my life. So
maybe there's more to this life than where I currently am. Exactly.
And that's what he desperately needs right now, because he's left with this sense of unfulfillment in his life. So he needs something. I tell you, it's more relatable than you know, right? So we all need that. Who doesn't want to be a superhero?
Right. Back at home, his wife approaches him and sets up the biggest emotional trap I've ever seen. I need to ask you something, and the answer won't affect me either way, which she repeats over and over.
Won't affect me either way. You know, that's my favorite part, because the moment she gets repetitive with it, you go, that means it will absolutely 100% affect you. I am sure of it at this moment, because you said it 20 times.
And of course, she immediately starts crying when he answers the question, the way that she was hoping.
The way that she was absolutely hoping that.
Yeah.
And her tears further the idea that she would not have been okay with the other answer. She was very relieved physically, to the point where she just had to cry immediately. So,
and I feel like Robin Wright, again, another one who didn't have a huge part in this movie, but she nailed it.
Didn't have a huge part. The problem, I think, was that we were so focused on the narrative of the comic, but you know, also the muted tone really kind of takes you away from the other characters. It's hard to focus on what's happening aside from the main story plot, because of how muted everything is until the end. You know, when he sees him carry her, that everything's just muted. So it makes sense.
The stadium, Elijah shows up and questions David about why he got into security. David bumps into a guy with a camouflage jacket, gets kind of the first vibe that we see in the movie. Warns another guard. Elijah picks up on it, and the guy sees the pat downs. He steps out of line. Then he admits to Elijah that he got an image of a silver gun with a black grip in his head.
Yes. So I was interested about that power. You know, that's kind of, it's like a foresight or a. It was very interesting to me, because usually, you know, when I was younger, I think, I'm not sure exactly the age that I first watched this movie, but when I thought of superheroes, most of the time, and I know this isn't the case, but most of the time I always related superheroes to just super strength, you know, superpowers that were very physically represented. But this was sort of like a foresight that was given to him just with the gentlest of nudges. And I thought that was interesting.
I like the idea that they kind of write it off to just being like instinct and vibes. And even though he has some very clear visions, and they get stronger as the movie progresses, it's chalked up to, oh, people have instincts.
Well, I think that's that just goes back in line with sort of the concept of all comic books are based on a stretch of what's actually happened. And so everything that he has as a power, the strength, the instincts, are all just heightened human natural tendencies or natural abilities. So it kind of fits in line with that, right? Like, everything is just a stretch of the truth, you know? So even a superhero is just enhanced version of a human, not necessarily this, you know, crazy off the wall character, just, you know, at one end of the spectrum, as Mr. Glass says.
We get another great composition where the camera's slowly pulling away while they're standing in the stadium doorway. So you see them slowly, like, illuminated from the back. They're right in the center of the screen. All the perspective lines are pointing towards them. I love that shot. So well done. That shot is, what else can you say? That shot is fantastic. It's just, again, another case of just
great direction in this movie with the shots. The cinematography was off the charts.
Elijah sees the guy in the camo jacket and pursues him, but slips and falls down the flight of stairs. He does manage to get a look at the gun, though, which is silver with a black handle. That is every time it's hard to watch that scene. That's
exactly what I was just thinking. It's one of the hardest scenes to watch. Just the physical pain of him falling down the stairs gets me every time. I cringe when I'm watching it. I'm like, oh, there's another bone. Oh gosh, I don't even know what bone that was, you know? Ugh.
Even rewatching and knowing he is who he is, it's still hard to see someone go through that.
It's hard to see the physical pain represented on screen. Absolutely.
Yeah, and the noises that they threw into it. Oh my god.
Oh, it gets you every time. Stop talking about it. I'm shivering over here. Exactly.
Joseph asks David to play football with his friends and his friend's cousin, who's the same football player that was referenced earlier by the sports agent.
I did put those connections together, but my question to you would be, do you think he could have beat him in football?
I think he could beat him in football.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. I was kind of wishing he had gone through it. I wish there'd have been like a deleted scene somewhere where he just completely kicks his butt on the field or something like that, and all the kids are like celebrating with him or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
From here, we go into arguably my favorite bit of the movie, working out in the basement, which is just so good in so many ways.
Tell the truth. Is it because you know deep down we all wish we could just suddenly bench more weight than we actually can? Because that's what I was thinking about.
That's a part of it.
The whole time I'm thinking, man, if I could just put more weights on suddenly, just because.
This part too has the most. There are parts in this, even though it's very downplayed, they're the funniest parts in the movie, and I laugh out loud every time at like two particular things in this. One of which is when Joseph is talking to him and he's like, do you think you could have beaten up Bruce Lee? But then he progresses it and he's like, what if he wasn't allowed to kick and you were really mad at him? That line kills me.
It's such a good line. It's so funny. He did a good job too. The child actor, he had a lot of good emotional scenes with his facial expressions and sort of getting into it. I thought he did a good job.
Yeah. Joseph secretly adds the weight and David keeps lifting. They keep adding more weight, keep lifting. And then the other part that really kills me is when at one point David's like, don't ever try something like this. You know how dangerous this is. And it cuts to Joseph and he's hiding in a closet.
Yes.
I love it. Because he starts off a little bit further away, like when he gets a lot of weight on there. And it's such like a Looney Tunes cut where you cut to him and he's just like peeking out from behind a door.
Suddenly he's 100 yards away behind like a bomb shelter. Yes.
Oh, I love it.
It's so good.
So good. So good. That's I love that scene. And that's where you get like the really great swells of his theme song and like the Hero Rising and everything.
The Hero Rising theme song that they had, they play it at the end too, but it's great. It's perfect. It's perfect for the movie. And it really fits the mood of that scene where he's sort of like realizing some okay, so maybe some of this is true here. Maybe it's not just instinct. Maybe it's not just speculation. I can see it now. I just lifted a crap ton away, you know.
Yeah.
Like, so I thought it was a good time for that music to really push in. Like, okay, I'm becoming the hero I'm supposed to be.
Oh.
Yeah,
gives me chills.
Oh yeah,
we went from the chills of falling downstairs to the chills of benching.
much better chills. Much better chills. Weight room chills.
We go to physical therapy with Elijah. He's given a list of all of his broken bones, and we next see him with Audrey at physical therapy. He figures out she's married to David just based on the story about the car crash that she tells. And now Elijah's starting to suspect that maybe he faked the accident so they could be together.
Yes, yeah. It was interesting the faking of the accident. I thought that was a cool scene, actually. I know that's a little later, but I did think that was a cool scene where you saw him make sort of that, that hard choice that we all have to make, right? He could have pursued something, or does he want to take the chance right here to pursue the life he thinks he wants? And I thought that was really a nice emotional scene for the movie, to kind of explain why he made that choice to fake an injury. Because it didn't make, faking an injury is not something usually you do,
right?
Unless, you want to get out of something, but I think he did it for
it's a very real reason, very
real life reason that we can all like relate to, right? Like, this is somebody that I may not get to be with if I don't do this. So now's my chance. Like, and he takes it.
And it shows how much their relationship has changed, because he gave up something that he really loves for something that he loved even more. And now you look at where they are.
Do you think that contributed to why he fell away? So playing sports, maybe, it's not a superhero role, but it's a more physical, it's a more fulfilling role if you think about, his powers being strength and things like that. Maybe that was why it was easier to be in a relationship and be sort of normal in his life at that point, because he was expressing it in other ways with his strength and his abilities and maybe his instinct on the football field. And then after making that choice, he started to do more and more normal adult things, which don't take many superpowers to do, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Or maybe fortunately, because sometimes it feels like doing taxes takes, some kind of special power.
Yeah.
But
it feels like it's like a denying of oneself.
Exactly.
And as soon as he started denying, it's when things started slipping away.
Exactly.
Meanwhile, David's catching flashes of the crimes happening from the people at the stadium kind of bumping into him there. So we're getting a few stronger vibes from him at this point. Still not to the level that he'll be at, but it's getting stronger.
Yeah, and to circle back to what I said before, at this point in the movie, starting with the weightlifting scene, and the hero rising music, it's all coming together. The color is again starting to show up more and more frequently. The dull atmosphere is starting to warm up. We've gone from tepid to lukewarm. We're starting to get slightly towards warm with the colors. The atmosphere never completely changes, but you do start to see very bold changes in the color schemes, color is like one of the first things I notice in a movie every time. I always catch it in cinematography because it's so noticeable to me that just the contrast of colors and how they use that to portray emotions or to portray sort of a subplot that's happening or an assistant plot.
And when he gets those vibes to the perpetrators of whatever crime he's witnessing, you generally have some sort of flash of color on them, whether it be a shirt or a jacket or...
Almost every one of them, I believe, with the orange with the convict, the blue with the drug dealer. I believe there were a couple other ones, but
someone else has a red one. There's a woman in the Penn Station later that has a red jacket on.
Yes, they all are wearing a very bright outfit, which is, again, him using his ability brings out color, right? So that's, an interesting way to look at it. And I think that's absolutely represented when he's using his powers. Color is there. That's what he's doing. That's what he's supposed to be doing.
Yep. We get one of the other really emotional scenes in the movie coming up next, which is the scene in the kitchen where Joseph has the gun and he's threatening to shoot David, proving that what Elijah says is actually true. And there are a couple of great lines in here too. Joseph being like, "I'll just shoot him once," like that's the compromise.
Yeah, just one bullet, I'll aim for maybe just below the lung, right? Like I will just compromising on the shot. Yeah.
One of the things I love about this scene so much, not just how tense it is, but how well Bruce Willis goes through like this huge myriad of emotions and ways that he's trying to talk Joseph down. Like he goes from, "We're friends don't shoot each other, do they, Audrey?" And then he starts screaming. He's like, "I'm gonna leave." Like he immediately goes to mad from being his buddy. He's just trying everything.
He's going through the full gambit of emotions trying to stop him, which it makes sense. He's being desperate with it. I thought I loved how that little part got me too, but not for the reasons you said. It's when he said friends don't shoot friends, and that was when he's right, Audrey, and the mom's like, "Right, Joseph, friends don't shoot friends." She was very like a panicked, like I don't know, it makes me chuckle for some reason, just the quick like yeah, oh absolutely, like
like
fake
how else
little
do you
like
respond
just quickly, yeah. I thought it was great.
Great scene. We go back to limited edition after that. David tells Elijah to stay away from him and his family because of what Joseph almost did. He also tells him that he almost drowned as a kid, which the principal of Joseph's school had told him. He didn't remember it for whatever reason, but it's kind of like the weakness has revealed itself.
His kryptonite, so to speak.
Yes. Which, oddly enough, an M. Night Shyamalan movie where water is a weakness.
Oh, that is... I've never seen that before. Does that happen? No, that's completely new, innovative topic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, never seen it. Never
happened in any other
Never
movie
happened
before.
in any of his other... Just doesn't like staying hydrated, I guess. I don't know.
I guess not. We get the date after that, and he admits to her that things started going wrong when he had a nightmare, and he didn't wake her up so she could say that everything was all right, which is another kind of great foreshadowing moment that we'll circle around back on later.
I think that's a relatable, to relationships in general. You always think about like sometimes they're portrayed as this big thing happened, right? But sometimes it's the little things, and I think it's true to life. When did I stop loving you, or when did I stop liking you? And it's always some little thing like that. Like the time I woke up and didn't, I think it's always little stuff like that. It made him feel more real to me when he said that. Like I very much identified with that comment he made.
Yeah, it's a very relatable.
The movie does a good job at that. Like it does a good job at being relatable. And again, I think it does a good job in general of making this extraordinary thing seem just a hair off from reality, so that you can relate to it and you can say, okay, I see how he's just slightly a hero. Okay, that's what a superhero is. He's just an enhanced version of what's actually there. And they did a good job with that. They did a good job with that.
A message on the answering machine from Elijah suggests that water is David's weakness. After he told him that, he kind of suggested that was possible. We see David's memory then of the car accident and that he, in fact, was not injured, as he claims. So we have our confirmation.
There's the confirmation.
Then David calls Elijah and admits he was never injured and asks him what to do. Now he wants guidance. Tells him to go to Penn Station, which he does, and the people start to bump into him. We start to see those bigger flashes of vibes, the ones we were just talking about, the woman stealing the jewelry, and then the big one is the convict who I believe was a janitor, and then
I believe that was what he was supposed to. It was hard to tell,
mechanic,
but
something
it
like that.
Seemed like he was pushing a trash can, so you would believe maybe he was the janitor for the building.
That was my assumption.
I think that's a safe assumption.
So he follows that guy home, finds the homeowner dead inside, rescues 2 kids that he finds alone, and goes to find a woman tied up upstairs. But when he goes to rescue her, the intruder pushes him out a window into the pool, which is a frightening scene. Not only knowing because this is his weakness, but also just thinking about being underwater, wrapped in something that you can't escape from, the pool cover. That's terrifying.
Yeah, I would say a normal person could drown for that. It's a very frightening scene.
Yeah.
And, sort of the darkness and the water all around you with like plastic. Oh my gosh, I can't imagine. It was definitely an anxious scene for me as well, watching that play out. I thought the criminal there was creepy. Not necessarily in the later scenes, but in the beginning scene where they show the flash from when he touches him, and he's like his "Can I come in?" statement to the guy at the door, if you remember.
Absolutely.
And just forces his way in.
Yeah.
Oh, that was really creepy.
It's like, I really like your house.
Yeah. Exactly. I really like your house, and just that one got me when I was younger. I was like, oh, this guy's creepy.
Oh yeah, it makes your skin crawl.
Exactly, it's a skin crawling moment for sure.
So we see this is a thing we see in superhero movies kind of a lot, especially in like Spider-Man movies. The people who are cheering him on or that he saves kind of rallying to protect him as well. So we get that a little bit here with the 2 kids that he saved previously, reaching in with the pool stick and pulling him out of the pool and rescuing him now. Yep, that was probably a little expected for me. I was like, how's he going to get out? And I was like, well, no one's going to. And then it's like, I bet the kids he just saved, come to get him. And sure enough, they help him out. But you're right. That is a theme we see. The saved become the savior. It's probably one of those tropes somewhere. Yeah. I'm sure it has a name for it. But yes, we've seen that before. Yeah, Spider-Man, I think, is that what you said? Yeah, Spider-Man. There's a part where they like carry him, and they always like fight and rally behind him and stuff. His city protects him. Is it the scene with the when they're in the train and they like carry him? Spider-Man 2, and they kind of pass him over. They pass him, and then stuff. He didn't have his mask on. Yeah, right. I remember that scene. But they got his back. Like that's the important part. Exactly. He goes upstairs and now chokes out the intruder and rescues the woman. I've seen some people describe this as him like snapping the guy's neck. I didn't get that impression at all. I just felt like he choked him out based on the hold that he had on him. It was definitely a hold. I can't see any part of that scene which makes me think he snapped his neck. I don't think he definitely seemed like a choke. So I got to agree with you. No, I don't think it was a kill either. I mean, unless he held it way too long, but I'm pretty sure he just kind of knocked him out. Yeah. And had him get arrested or something afterwards. Yeah. And I don't think the woman was dead either, even though she like fell down. She probably passed out. I wondered about that. I wasn't sure if she was dead or if she was just she was just out of it, like completely. I felt like she was unconscious and that was just holding her up until she was untied. It's very they didn't make it clear. And so I think the first time I watched it, I assumed she was dead based on his reaction. The way his body language when she fell over signaled to me that she was dead. But then watching it later, I thought about it and I was like, well, maybe she's not actually dead. He's just, it's more of like, this is the gravity of the situation kind of thing. If she was dead, that's even weirder for him to be like standing over her and like spitting the water at her and stuff. And oh gosh, which was also super creepy.
That was super creepy. But yeah, maybe he was trying to wake her up or something like that.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, that's what I was thinking.
It's very possible.
So we go back home. We see immediately his wife being carried up the stairs, which is a really interesting shot because not only are we barely seeing him, she looks super rigid.
She's very rigid because, well, I assume you have to be. If you've already carried somebody, it's like if they're floppy, it's so hard to carry them. Yeah. It's like carrying a bowl of spaghetti, but if they're rigid, it's easy to carry.
It's almost like she's floating, and I don't know if that's on purpose or that's just a circumstance of what they were doing.
I was going to say it's the way they shot it, and it had to look that way. But the moment you said that, it may have been a design choice. Maybe they wanted it to look like he was having zero effort. Like he could hold her in such a rigid state without any effort because he was so strong. He could just physically make her feel like she was floating. There's no give at all to his strength.
Like he's fully activated now.
Fully activated. I like the way you worded that.
Fully activated.
Superhero mode on.
When he carries her up, puts her in his bed, and then tells her that he had a bad dream. And there's that circle back to the date, which I love. I love that.
I love that as well. I do like when they explain that away. Like he basically is like, look, bad dream. I'm ready for you again. Yeah. My life has meaning. It has purpose. It has color. You're here again. Oh. And that was a good way to portray it.
The next morning, David and Audrey are eating breakfast. Joseph comes downstairs and David shows him the newspaper with the story about the mystery hero with artwork done by Alex Ross, actually.
Really? Okay.
That drawing in the newspaper is an Alex Ross drawing.
I love that drawing. That's awesome.
It's so good. It's so good. And he whispers, "You were right," and signals for him to keep it quiet. His face, his son's face in the scene. Oh my God.
Incredible.
So good.
It was emotional. It was incredible. I love that scene. It's a very defining scene for me because they just have this moment. The son looks like he can barely keep it together. And he like, I was wondering as I was watching again, I was like, what is the mom thinking right now? Does she hear them cry? Like crying? Is this just sort of like things are still wrong? Like what's happening? And so I was wondering what her thoughts on it, but maybe it makes sense after everything that's been going on with the family, with the gun and stuff like that. It might be expected, but it was a great scene. It really, really striking, emotional setup there.
Yeah. Back at Limited Edition, where there's a gallery showing taking place, David meets Elijah's mother, who's still fantastic. Again, another smaller part in the movie that she absolutely crushes.
Oh yeah. No, the mom was fantastic. Just the doctor, the mom, two very small parts. Both were extremely well crushed by the actors that portrayed them. Too bad they didn't have bigger roles because of how well they did.
I would watch a spinoff.
I would absolutely watch Doctor and Mom hanging out. Like it's just yeah, that's great.
In the back room, he meets Elijah and they shake hands. At which David has his visions of the mass tragedies that Elijah has caused in an effort to find somebody like him. And we get the villain reveal.
The villain reveal, so I thought this was really cool, and I'm going to bring it back around to colors. One thing you've noticed about Elijah the whole time is every time he's around, there's a lot of color. His purples, his bright colors when he's with David's wife, there's a lot of colors between them. You could say that the wife is because David finally talked to her a little bit, or maybe it's because Elijah's there. And every scene, there's always something bright for Elijah. And I think this plays out in one of the last lines he says, which is, "I know who I am." And I think he's always knew who he was. So he had no lack of color in his life. He always knew who he was. Yeah. So that's why he always, you see it when he's in the comic books earlier in the movie. You see it again in his little private gallery. Anywhere he is, there's always nice, bright colors around. The scene is full of life and color.
Yeah, when he's in the comic book shop, that's not like a muted scene compared to the rest of them.
One of the least muted scenes when it's just him in the comic book shop. Well, and the other guy, but it's a very, very bright and colorful scene, which is very strange for most of the movie, which was, and then at the end, again, there's a lot of color in his gallery, but then now you have two characters who both knew who they are.
Yeah.
And so again, full color. So you thought I couldn't bring color back again, but I did it.
Yeah. And then they get the last line in the movie. They called me Mr. Glass.
They called me Mr. Glass.
Which is that thing where I was like, how did I not see that this entire movie? Because I didn't pick, like, as much of an avid movie watcher as I am, and as much as I picked up on so many of those signals, when I first watched this, I was like, what?
Are you kidding me? Yeah, exactly.
It threw me. And they did such a freaking good job.
They did a good job building his character up with this air of mystery where you weren't really sure. Like I said, he was very psychologically ambiguous. Like, what's his motive? What you go back and forth. Is he a nice guy? Is he weird? Like you couldn't really figure him out. And then at the end, he is in fact the bad guy. He is the villain who is just a little off, which is traditional of villains, right? In superhero.
Totally.
And then again, in traditional superhero fashion, at the end, when we're just at the text, we see he has been sent to a criminally insane institute. What? Really? Instead of a maximum security prison, we're going to a criminally insane institute? I've never heard that before in the comic book or superhero world.
If there's anything that I don't love about this movie, I've never been a fan of in movies where they do like the Animal House ending screens where they put text on the characters. Like, I'd rather they just show me really quick.
I think the problem is it's played out. Like, it's been done so many times. You're like, okay, I'm over it. Okay, I don't like this. Even if I even appreciate when a movie does it, but they show a corresponding scene to go with the text line. So it's like you see him being locked up, or you see, just doing the text to tell me. It's like I don't really get anything out of that.
Yep.
Like it never really does much for me. So I completely agree with that.
But that's pretty much the movie. Any other thoughts we didn't get to that you had that you wanted to get in there?
Man, I wrote 10 years worth of colors, so I think we got through all that. No. I think it's a pretty straightforward movie. Which is not to say it's not a great movie. I think it is straightforward, so it doesn't lend itself to too much depth in that sense. But no, I think we hit most of the major themes. It's such a great movie, and it's like I really highly recommend it to anybody I see. Anytime I bring it up and people say they haven't seen it, I'm like, how have you lived your life without seeing Unbreakable? Because it's been a movie I've seen so many times throughout my life. It's
a movie I always want to recommend to people, and then at the same time I'm afraid to, because I'm like, it's a little slow at times. It's not like this big bombastic movie. Everything it does is subtle. But if you love movies, you will love this movie.
That's a good word for this. We've used a lot of descriptive words to describe how this movie's sort of slow, it's tepid, but subtle. It's a very subtle movie that slowly grows into this picture, this comic book of a movie, and I really appreciate that. But again, yeah, you're right. You have to appreciate movies to appreciate that type of pacing.
Totally.
So,
well, it's that time where I'm going to ask you to, if you don't mind, to let people know where they can find you on the internets and your stream and your social medias and all that.
Oh, I spend my whole life trying to get people not to find me on the internet. Oh, no. So I'd say the most important place to find me is over on Twitch, silence_night over on Twitch. It's where I spend most of my time out in the internet world. It's where I spend 95% of my time. Silence Night on Twitter as well, I suppose, if you want to go there. But that's basically it. And running streams all the time.
Great. And as always, if people want to just get the links, they can go right to the show notes at thegeekgeneration.com and find this episode. And you can click on all the things to follow them on all the things. Well, that's it. We did it.
Thanks so much for having me. It was a really great time. I will talk about my favorite movies with you any day.
Yay! And I will make you.
You won't be making, but I appreciate it.
Random Movie Club is a production of the Geek Generation. If you like this show, be sure to check out our podcasts and videos at thegeekgeneration.com, plus our live streams at twitch.tv/thegeekgeneration. Don't forget, you can support Random Movie Club by visiting our Patreon campaign at thegeekgeneration.com/support. As always, thanks to Michael McLeod of Wolf's Den Music for our theme song. A link to his site can also be found on our site. Thanks for listening, and make sure you join us next time when we'll discuss Split. See you then.